while we're heaving up a mountain, there's a 73-year-old woman carrying like firewood and like maybe two other children just scooting right by us up the mountain in sandals,
Men are being lied to. You're told midlife is a time for crisis and struggle. In reality, it's a time to thrive. Welcome to the Midlife Male podcast, a show that stops focusing on the why and shows you how to start living life on your terms. Because your best days are still ahead. Welcome to another episode of the Midlife Male podcast. I am your host, Greg Scheinman. This week, it's a new, extraordinary episode of the show, a new format. This week, I'm bringing you something special, and we're going to dive into an unforgettable adventure with a group of remarkable midlife males. Today, we're journeying to the heart of Guatemala, following the steps of a unique assembly of friends brought together by the indomitable spirit of Dan Cyprian, a man celebrated for his tenure as the former chairman of Canaan Capital. And for his 66th birthday, Dan orchestrated an ambitious trek through the challenging terrains of Guatemala's Mayan volcano villages. It's a journey that promised the luxury of glamping, but delivered an experience far more raw and authentic. Our guests today are a testament to success. And I want to thank my friend Billy Mann for bringing this group together. I have had Billy on the podcast before. He is extraordinary as a husband, a father, a man, a musician. He wrote about this trip that he took, and I saw it, and I reached out to him immediately, wanting to hear more. The guys that joined him on this trip, and Dan, for this birthday celebration, are a testament to success. Hailing from the echelons of investment banking, technology, and private equity, including luminaries from Goldman Sachs. And among the distinguished company were also veterans of the British SAS and the Israeli Defense Forces, and all of these guys united by their physical prowess, ranging impressively from 6 to 3-pack abs and their seasoned travel portfolios. And despite the varied backgrounds, these middle-aged adventurers, 51 to 66, embarked on this trek not just as acquaintances, but emerged as brothers bonded through adversity. And this was no small feat. It required exceptional physical condition for the 8 to 9 mile daily treks, ascending through impoverished Mayan villages under the shadow of poverty. And contrary to the luxurious promises of glamping, what they faced and encountered were the harsh realities of delayed equipment, substandard food, and the biting cold of Guatemalan nights, accompanied only by the howls of wild dogs and the crowing of roosters. And this challenge was further amplified by medical emergencies, including severe food poisoning, the stark realization of their vulnerability in the face of nature's unpredictability. And amidst these trials, the journey was transformative. They saw egos dissolved and replaced by a profound sense of camaraderie and humility. And as they navigated the rugged beauty of Guatemala, the volatile volcanoes, which actually erupted 2 weeks after they left, right where they were, and the stark contrast of extreme poverty, what they noted was that their achievements and financial accolades faded into irrelevance against the backdrop of life's fragility and the strength found in unity. It's an episode not just a recount of an adventure, it's a reflection on life, midlife, friendship, and that razor's edge between recklessness and revelation. And it's about how a group of successful midlife males confronted their limits, faced the specter of mortality, and emerged forever changed, bound by the shared experience of having cheated death not once, but twice. So join us as we delve into the heart of this incredible tale, exploring the depths of human endurance and the unbreakable bonds forged in the face of adversity over a birthday, and levity, and humor, and empathy, and compassion, and an opportunity of hope and possibility, and probability to maximize middle age. All right, let's talk about the plunge. I love my plunge. This is a high quality, great looking, high performance cold plunge. It uses powerful cooling, filtration, and sanitation to give you a perfectly chilled, clean water experience with no ice needed. And look, I don't know who's going to tell you that they love sitting in freezing cold water. I'm not going to tell you that, but what I can tell you is that I love how I feel when I get out of sitting in cold water. So much so that it has become a daily habit. The plunge is the best product that I have found out there for this experience. It is easy. You flip the lid. There is no ice needed. The chiller keeps the water set to exactly what temperature you want it at. I've had mine for years, and it is extremely low maintenance. If you are looking to maximize middle age, if you are looking to bring cold therapy into your life, and you should be, go get a plunge. Go to plunge.com, and when you're there, use promo code MidlifeMale and save. Sisu saunas. I am in my Sisu sauna pretty much every day of the week. I have the 2-person Eddy barrel model. They make multiple sizes. Whichever Sisu sauna you go with, rest assured you are getting a quality product, a quality build, and quality performance. Cardiovascular health, autoimmune chronic pain and fatigue conditions, mental health, exercise performance and metabolism, detoxification. Those are 5 of the reasons I am in my Sisu sauna. And they work because when I get out of my Sisu sauna, I simply feel better, happier, and healthier. And you can too. Just go to sisulifestyle.com, use promo code MidlifeMale, and you'll save on your own Sisu sauna. It is another morning. It is another Midlife Male podcast. This week, I am joined by a large crew of gentlemen here. Normally, we've got one Midlife Male on the show. Today, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus myself, all here this week. And the reason we are here is there was an epic guys trip put together that I read about. Billy Mann posted it on his Facebook and Instagram. I read about this trip and I said, I've got to learn more about how this came together, what's going on here, what happened in Guatemala. And here we all are today. And Dan, I want to start with you because my understanding here is that you're the genius who put this together, right?
Believe me, some of these guys were not calling me genius at the time, but yeah, I did put it together.
So this was your brainchild that I understand at 65, you wanted to do something like this, or maybe this exactly, and it didn't come together until 66. So my question is, 1, why did you want to do this? And then 2, why did it take another year? And how did this all come together?
Yeah, sure. So look, I mean, when you reach 66, I still consider that midlife, by the way, just to be clear. When you reach 66, you sort of feel like you want to, if you're in good shape, if you're feeling good about yourself, you want to kind of test it a little bit. And I have to say, and you want to test it a little bit, and you want to do that ideally with friends. And I have to say that this whole trip in some ways was inspired by Cliff Berger over here, who actually had I believe it was 50th birthday trip to Idaho.
55.
55, excuse me. True midlife. Who went to Idaho to do a rafting trip basically, and invited some friends along, and I went along with him in June. And in addition to snowing in the middle of June in Idaho, we had an interesting set of circumstances happen all through that trip. But it really was a great way to bring people together in an environment where you're kind of focused on a task that isn't office related or anything like that. And you're with a bunch of guys that, in that case, I didn't know too well either before. And so I said, something like that would be a fantastic way to celebrate my birthday. And so I did want to do something a little bit more extreme. I wanted to do something a little bit more out there. And so, it really started with me essentially Googling extreme adventures. just kind of like what are those, just extreme adventures and kind of reading through different kinds of extreme adventures. And, then Guatemala popped up. And, I had actually been there ages ago, 30, 40 plus years ago with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife. We loved it. And it truly is an amazing place. It's volcanoes, it's jungle, it's Mayan ruins. It's kind of true Indiana Jones stuff. And so I said, Guatemala trek through the jungle, 4 days. What could be better than that? So that's really how it all came about. And that's, I started digging into it and said, this is the thing. This is it.
How did the group itself come together? So you decide you're going to do this. What are the qualifications? I'm sure you know a lot of people, you have a lot of friends. Now are you thinking about, how do we pull these guys together? Who's capable? Walk me through how you guys how you selected this group of guys.
Yeah. So number one rule is no assholes. I thought that rule might have been violated a few times on the trip, but it turns out, fortunately, it wasn't. And the one of the constraints I had, we collectively had, was you could only bring 12 people. That was the max on the trip. So I had to sort of identify 12 people that not only were my friends, not only that I loved, but that seemed like they would get along well together. And so reached out to say essentially 12 folks. Did have one or two take some real hesitation about it. I think one said, if you're going on your next birthday to Miami on a golf trip, let me know. But I think I'm going to pass on this one. But did get actually it turned out to be 11 because we did have one drop out at the last minute. But did get those folks together, and it wasn't about anything related to who know who. It wasn't about anything related to is this person, kind of, a huge, big muckety muck success, or is this person, not? It really was all about, are they good people? Will they get along? And, are they my friends, and do I love them? And so that's really how it all came together. And you got 5 of us here, including me, but there's another 6 that weren't able to make and probably wouldn't have been able to fit in the Zoom. And so we all got together and we did it.
That's fantastic. On the flip side, guys, for any of you, when this call comes in or this invite, comes in, what are you thinking? Okay. I mean, are we asking for permission, or is this a great excuse to go? What are the conversations and thought process like on the other side?
Permission. Yeah, that was, you have to talk to your wife because you're about to leave her for a while. You're about to leave your kids. There's an expense involved. Although Dan was very generous in shouldering most of that, and that was part of the incentive. And really took down the barrier. It was like, yeah, go to Guatemala. Let's try this out. I think from my standpoint, I'm not a big third world leave the United States person, and so that was some trepidation on my part that I had to get over. But looked like everybody was in, so I had to go.
For me, if I didn't have to put a bulletproof vest on, I was in. So. And I just had to make sure that my life insurance policy was paid up. And then I had my wife's full support.
My biggest concern was actually I knew that I didn't know any of the guys. And most of the folks that Dan knows that are on the trip were people from the world that he was familiar with. And, as someone who comes from more of the music and media side of things, I really wondered, am I going to be able to relate to these guys? Are they going to connect with me? I'm a bit used to being the odd man out at sometimes when I'm around folks I'm friends with from the financial world, but this was a lot of people who didn't know each other in a very, in a tight living space and in a tight life space. And that to me was more of the risk in some ways than the physicality, though I didn't I really didn't realize, Greg, just how intensely physical this was for all of us. I don't think anybody did.
As intensely physical as you're saying it was, like, how was it mentally? Even in preparing and getting ready to show up, even that moment when you guys first get together or first board that plane to go there, like, what were you thinking about?
I was thinking about my REI bill. the long list of supplies that were required for this trip that I didn't have. I don't know, Cliff. There was I think you and I were wearing some of the same clothes,
we had the
right?
same outfit. Yeah, I think I had the same bill as you too.
Yeah, I think that was. I mean, it was sort of the humor of it, but it also illustrated just how, as you can get a bunch of middle-aged guys that are in good shape, I don't think that outdoors experience is in our natural wheelhouse. I mean, Cliff, I think more for you than for me.
No, I was saying that when Dan first called me, I was kind of excited because I was like, when's the next time I'm going to go to Guatemala? And I love hiking, and Dan came on my trip, and it was pretty adventurous. So I figured, why not? Sounds fun. Meet a new group of guys. I was a little concerned because some of Dan's friends are, big shots. And I was like, we're going to be around a bunch of guys that are talking about money the whole time and how successful they are. And to tell you the truth, the guys were terrific. There was really very little discussion about business, money. It was really about people talking about their kids, family, their life, which was fantastic. You really got to know a group of guys that, before this time, none of us, only a few of us knew each other. And it was just a fantastic experience.
That was one of the things that I really enjoyed. Inevitably, when you're trekking up some of these mountains, you're going to be next to somebody and you need a diversion from your huffing and puffing. And so being able to chat with the person next to you to kind of commiserate, but also learn about what their life was about, and to share with them what your life is about. It really was a good bonding experience.
I absolutely agree with that. I think there's something to hiking and these types of experiences. And I've done a few of these where, you go out and, as you said, like, you're hiking along, everyone ends up at a different pace. They kind of break off. They have these conversations. And I think it's interesting, as you talk about with successful guys in particular, successful guys, I think that what you're getting at or alluding to is there's this perception or sometimes feeling that we're going to be talking about work, or we're going to be talking about money, or we're going to be, stacking chips, or like everyone's going to be out there just like whipping it out to see who's his biggest. And there's all of this. And it's not that. Like, when you really get down to it in terms of, what's important or what's impactful and what are the takeaways, it's not that. It tends to be those conversations along the trail. It tends to be those little break off, moments or even hours where you're pairing off or you're grouping up. And was that even different each day or at different times? I'm curious about you guys, like, even on the takeaway side, like, hey, there's that conversation that Billy and Paul had, or that Will and Dan had, like this stuff that sticks with you and is going to stick around for forever, really.
Well, by the way, I want to chime in here because there's a couple of unraveling points that I don't want to miss. And I think that was more the prompt. I think part of it, just in experiencing it, is I was definitely the person that knew the fewest people. I only knew Dan, was kind of, and everything was an unknown step. It wasn't just an unknown step up a mountain. It was an unknown step, like we didn't know what was coming next. And when Dan sent us the invitation, it was glamping. That was one. That was, and the list of like how glampy this was, it was very short. And the first day of the proper hike, which was really, I think, that was the moment where you saw just a bunch of alpha guys who didn't really want to share just how absolutely breathless and in sort of a cold shock from the intensity and the rigor of the climb happened. When we finally got to the first night of glamping, again, I'm putting that in quotes, the tents weren't all there. the shower, which was, a bladder system on the top of a big pickup truck, was not available. The bathroom on glamping was a white box next to the pickup truck, and there were wild dogs, and we were parked on a field next to what is essentially a double yellow line highway and a cemetery. And that was the first night. And I think everybody, including Dan, was like, okay, wait a minute. So I think that's kind of the we're not in Kansas anymore moment for everybody. But that also, there was a decision to be made. I don't know if this felt like this to you, Dan, but it's like, we're here. There's no returning. We can't go back, and we're in it, and we'll figure it out. I don't know about, Cliff, you and Will and Paul, how you feel, but that's
100%.
what I remember.
100%. Yeah. It was, you can't, to Billy's point, I did, it was, there was a positioning of it by the trekking companies, glamping, and I think they genuinely thought it was glamping. But it's a Guatemalan trekking company, so their definition of glamping is a little different. And it's hard to overstate how intense this thing was. We did over 4 days. We did over 30,000 feet in ascent and descent, which is kind of Everest, right? And it was. I knew it was going to be hard, and I trained pretty hard, and I think most of us did. Maybe not all of us trained pretty hard for it, but it kicked my ass, and I think it kicked everybody's ass. And so, to Billy's point, it's kind of there's no way out but through. There's no way out but through. And so that with the cemetery and the tents not up, that was definitely, I would say, a low moment, and kind of oddly enough a high moment too.
I want to touch on that, the actual high moment aspect of, look, the reality is you guys can pretty much do whatever you want. It's like, okay, you can choose. And there's something about the stories, again, and the smiles and the experiences. It's like recapping something like this has just a different grin to it across all of your faces versus, again, we went to Miami and we played some golf, or we checked into the St. Regis and we did this. I think it's like, is there something to this when almost you can afford to do anything? We're choosing to do something that is ultimately life changing, in the experience. And the takeaways from that, as you said, this clearly wasn't the glamping that maybe you were expecting, but compared to how, the individuals are living in Guatemala, they might have seen it very differently in what you guys, saw. So maybe share a little bit about like how it puts things in perspective, I think, for us in this kind of second phase of our life, when it's experiences, over things, when it's, hey, like money doesn't buy happiness. These are things we can't buy. 30,000 feet of ascent and descent. It's not something like we actually have to do it. You can't just buy it, like we got to get out there and we got to get into that. And is that kind of more of what the metric of success looks like for you guys now?
Yeah, I think at this age, if you want to have some extraordinary memories, you need to kind of step out of your comfort zone every once in a while. And then so going on a golf trip or something of that sort, where you're lying on a beach, is still in the comfort zone. And Dan's always been good at this. Dan's always been kind of prodding us to get out of those comfort zones. I've known Dan for a while, and he's always been interested in these kind of outlandish kind of treks that pull you out of your comfort zone, and they're going to test you. And this one, it tested us. But in doing so, I don't know, we've got some memories now that are hard to forget.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things, I can't say, and there were moments where I was like, I'm sure all of us were like, well, what the fuck did we do here? It was just, there were times that it was, I don't know, miserable is quite the right word, but it was just really you walk 4 hours straight up a mountain, and it's by the second hour, you're wondering about a lot of
You're
things.
questioning yourself. I question myself quite a bit.
Yeah, it was grueling, Greg. I mean, it was grueling, and that's the word. And the other guys, that aren't, didn't join us now, also grueling. And there were a couple former, military guys, and it was grueling. There was, I think in the beginning, like day one, you can lean on your bravado and your fitness to sort of push you there. But on day two, that's over. And what I loved about it was the fact that when it became clear to everybody that there was no winning. You can't win this race. Because in the beginning, it sort of separated off into two packs, And I went back and forth. Some days I was lagging behind, really struggling. Other days I really pushed myself forward. But by the end of the experience, if somebody was having a little stronger day, they would migrate back to support other people. And if, you felt like you needed to advance, you were encouraged. It was really, and that happened, I think, pretty naturally. And I even with the guys here, I mean, I got very sick with food poisoning early, and I was the only one. And my half of my pharmacy is on the Zoom right now, who looked after me and said, "I've got this. This will help you with whatever." But Cliff is a great photographer, and I didn't know Cliff before this, but I learned what an amazing photographer he is. And Pierce, another guy who was on the trip, took great photos. And I think when we started to see, to your point, Greg, the poverty, and in the middle of this, it's 53% poverty rate in Guatemala, of which more than 10% is extreme, the worst poverty. And you see these beautiful children wearing traditional dress, just never having seen guys. I mean, we're all pretty big guys. I'm 6'4", 225. See this group of big guys, and part of the fun of that, by the way, Greg, is while we're heaving up a mountain, there's a 73-year-old woman carrying firewood and maybe two other children just scooting right by us up the mountain in sandals. It was. I feel like I would ask the guys, I found myself really feeling conflicted about being a tourist, sort of observing the poverty and then trying to metabolize it. It's like, oh, this is such a beautiful landscape, but you're also looking at such extreme levels of poverty at the same time. I think that put us all in our place. I think, to Cliff's point, there was no discussion about money or business, because any discussion about it would have been, I think it would have reflected so poorly on any of us.
So what were you thinking about then? Because I get that. Go on, Cliff.
Oh, I was just going to say that for me, one of the best parts of the entire trip was observing all the Guatemalan children and people and how they lived, and the smiles on their face when they saw us, and when we asked them if we could take pictures of them. It was really incredible. I mean, they were, frolicking, running around, so excited that we were there. And just watching a 12-year-old boy with cinder blocks on his back, climbing up a hill that I don't think any of us could climb up. And I don't know how much weight was on his back, but it was pretty incredible. So to Billy's point, just seeing these people and their lives was an incredible experience. So
I guess it's for all of us, but as you were going through that and you're saying, look, it's not the place, or to be thinking about, again, career or status or money and all that. I'm curious, what each of you guys were thinking. Did you have times to yourself where you were just out there with your own thoughts? Did you journal? Did you take voice memos? I mean, obviously, and Cliff, you guys are taking pictures and everything, but were there these moments of clarity or things that came into your minds in your head that you're like, okay, this is what's important to me, in life or at home or where I am, that just, little or big, I say a lot of times, like, the little things are the big things, and when you're out there on your own in uncharted territory, you might be surrounded by some other men, but we may spread out. And it's like, you have some of these moments by yourself. And I think to all of us, they're individual moments about what we find is important and what's impactful in life. And I'm curious to maybe get inside your heads a little bit on what some of those things were, what maybe you brought home and maybe what you shared and what you didn't share.
Yeah, I think I recall why, and Will and I were kind of bunkmates in this, and I had in childhood I was a Boy Scout for several years, and I thought I had left camping behind at that point, and this brought home why I left camping behind. It was, to me, it was as Billy put it, it was glamping, and so we had an extraordinary number of amenities that I didn't have as a Boy Scout. But even so, it was nice to get home and back in my house with all the creature comforts I'm used to. But at the time, it was a lot of fun to share it with a good group of people. You were asking us some of the things we were able to relate to, among others. And there was a day that I was struggling to keep up, and Billy was walking by me, and he has tats all over him, and so I needed a diversion at that particular moment, and so I asked him. I said, "Billy, look, I need some help." I said, "Tell me a story about one of your tats," and so for the next several moments, he was sharing a story about one of his tats, which is a turtle with wings on it. And he shared how when he had started out in the industry, he was a bit shy of where his goals were, where he thought his goals were. And it wasn't until he built up some momentum in his life that he felt comfortable of where he was and where he was going. And the turtle represented that first part where it was very challenging for him, just like a race where you're the turtle, but it's a long race. And so it wasn't until later that he got his wings on this turtle and was able to start to fly. And so I brought that story home. I've got two young sons that are trying to make their way into adulthood. And I thought it was a very inspiring story, and I've shared that with them. And so, it's one of those things where I'll probably take that story forward. And for those few moments where Billy was relating that to me, I forgot about my feet hurting and the struggle of climbing this hill and then going back down it. And it took some of that pain away.
Yeah, I think I was the turtle. I was just slow and steady trying to win the race. And I was oftentimes, I never quite got my wings. As a matter of fact, I think, Cliff, you even carried my backpack, which wasn't even that heavy, just that load being lifted off. Greg, you mentioned, what are we taking away? I think one thing for me that we've mentioned in different contexts is comfort. This got me out of my comfort zone, and you hear that, but we become so accustomed to being comfortable. And so it's like, we're always seeking, these creature comforts. Like if you're a little too hot, you can turn up the air conditioner. If you're a little too cold, you can turn up the heat. When you're out in this environment, it's more difficult to rest into your discomfort. And I think it broadens you. But just, we've all mentioned these kids. I mean, to see these bright, smiling faces that are living in some of the most impoverished conditions you'll see filthy dirty, just living life and just experiencing and looking at all of these, white-faced guys coming through their villages and stuff and being so enamored with us and wanting to engage with us. And Billy's Spanish is a lot better than mine is, but also just trying to figure out a way that you can communicate and you can, express, your appreciation for, their country and this experience. And again, seeing what I would perceive as discomfort, but seeing their smiling faces made me feel like, I need to get comfortable with where I'm at, wherever that is, because I have a much more, luxurious life and creature comfort life than they'll ever have. So that word comfort kept coming up in my mind as I put that one foot forward, being that turtle at the back always.
Yeah, I want to just build on that for a minute, Greg, because I do think there's something very elemental about this trip, and I think in the end it was because it was so hard. And I think if you took the same group of guys, all fantastic guys, and you did the golf trip in Miami, I don't think we would we probably wouldn't have our thread going constantly, our WhatsApp thread going constantly. We probably wouldn't have the same degree of closeness. We've already got a reunion planned for next year. I don't think we would have that if it wasn't so damn hard. And that we did it all, did it together. And there's something about going through something very difficult with people together. And then it makes those moments where, talked about seeing the kids. You see these you off in the distance, there are these volcanoes, these mountains, and it's a bright blue sky. And there's, suddenly puffs of smoke coming out of them where the volcano is actually active. And you just see a sight like that and it takes your breath away. Of course your breath's already taken away from walking up the mountain, but it is, there is something about that comfort issue and just doing something really, really hard. And it was hard, not just during the day, it was hard at night. Because, it wasn't that comfortable. We were on an air mattress in a tent. I got to tell you, there's a myth that roosters crow only at the break of dawn. That is a lie. They crow all night long, let me tell you. And the dogs bark all night long. And it's hard to sleep. The altitude, we were up at like close to 10,000 feet. I think it was 9,500, something like that. And, so it was hard. It was hard, but the hardness of it and doing it together, I think was really fundamental to kind of feeling all the way that we feel right now.
Yeah. By the way, I'll also add that it was so cold that we all stood around a fire collectively waiting to get hot water bottles to sleep with to help us get at least some amount of sleep over the night between the barking dogs and the roosters. But
which we call babies, by the way. Everybody's waiting for their baby. Yeah. Where's the baby?
I actually missed the baby for 2 nights, and it was pretty cold.
I think Mike had his baby. Pierce had gummy bears and beef jerky, but he made it through. But I think the other point, Greg, and I think this is as it really relates to your platform, is that when you reach a certain point in life, you don't really have a lot of room to make new friends. You've got, your partner in your life, you have, your core group of friends, and if you have kids, you have your kids, and that's kind of your world. So the concept of being immersed in an environment like this, that's in just all encompassing, and then with an entirely new group of people that you don't know. And then as a result, finding an unexpected band of brothers that you never imagined you could have is also, I think, a really good lesson for me in making sure that I leave the social door of my life open a crack a little wider, maybe, that I'm not really restricted to the cast of characters in my life, no matter how much I love them, that there's, you can grow and make new friendships. And that's, I think, gets harder as we get older. I think it's harder and again, it's like, to Dan's point, it takes sometimes, I wish it didn't, but sometimes it takes an environment that's so jarring that all of your nervous system and the way that you typically approach new people, it's like out the window, and you just have to go in, full throttle with it. And even as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about the guys that aren't here with us, like Borja, who's like Dan's lifelong friend from Sweden, who came from Sweden and just, was in many respects just the greatest comic relief for us, in part because culturally he came from such a different place. He was such a naturalist about everything, and everything rolled off his shoulders like it was nothing. And he was very inspiring to me, just by being like another new flavor of human to be among the group. And I could say that about all of the guys.
Mm. I think there's something to it. What you guys are all describing is, I think there's something to a few things here. Like, one of them is this willingness to take that leap of faith, to get outside your comfort zone and take that leap of faith to go do something different, to go do something challenging, to embrace not only the curiosity, but maybe the fear, those things, because we get complacent, and you were saying, in our lives, and we tend to inherit these friendships or relationships, whether they're through schools or Little League or our kids and our partners and our job and lives in there. And I think a lot of us get to this, at least I did too, where, it's lonely at the top, not to say that I've ever been at the top, but the top or whatever you even describe it as, but it gets lonelier, I think, as you get on in life. And you mentioned the word outlier, Billy, before. And I think a lot of us tend to sometimes feel like the outliers. We could be in finance, but we also want to be adventurers, and trekkers. I was the only guy in the insurance industry for 14 years, I think, who didn't play golf, overall, and you start to find yourself, in these positions that might seem limiting, or if I'm not doing the conformity, complacency, redundancy thing, then I'm the outlier, and maybe there's something a little bit wrong with me. And then you see what you guys have done. And I've been on a number of these experiences now too, that there really is something to this iron sharpens iron thing, getting a group of guys together where it really doesn't matter what you do for a living. Like, you can either hang or you can't. You're either the comic relief guy, you're either a good guy, the comic relief guy, like, everybody brings something to the table to get through these challenging experiences. And I just think that there's so much hope and possibility that guys need to hear and be reinforced to say, it's okay to get outside that comfort zone. It's okay to take that on. It's okay not to know these people well or at all before you decide to go, because whatever you want, it's out there, it exists. In the events that I've done, and it sounds like you guys have had a similar experience even with this, there's no more supportive community thing out there than when you go to take on a hard thing and you're all actually in it together. And as you said, there's really no way out here. The only way is through, and nobody wants to just turn back, or be that guy. And the takeaways and the stories and the memories
are the ties that bind.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
the other, sorry, Greg, just one other thing that occurred to me. I just want to mention, one of the things that you kind of know at the time, because I knew I was the kind of common denominator, so I knew everybody, and I knew this was the case. But there was something pretty amazing, I think, about the fact that we were going through all this, again, this very difficult trek, and there really was no whining, no whinging at all for the entire 4 days. There was laughter, there was huffing and puffing, there was just, but you never heard like, there just wasn't that. It was, everybody just knew this is something we're going through. We're going through. There's no way out but through. And you just didn't have any kind of whinging at all, which was great and could have been different with different people.
I mean, we talked about kind of checking the egos a little bit at the door, when you go on this. And you guys are all smart guys, but I want to address the risk reward scenario a little bit too. I mean, you can say it jokingly a little bit now that you're back safely and soundly, but the reality is on this particular trip, you guys really did cheat death a couple of times. I mean, you might have gone in under one preconceived notion of glamping, but the reality was you were very much out there on your own and cheat. Were there conversations about, hey, the risk is not worth the reward, after a while? I know we just talked about the only way is through and everything, but there's a fine line between bravado and we're all in this together and we're going to get through. And hey, like, where's the line and risk reward here? Because we do want to come home, like at the end of the day, we're not full-time adventurers, on some rescue mission out here. We are trying to have a life-changing experience, but certainly not a life-ending one.
Yeah. By the way, I would say, just as a reality check, we weren't traveling with a paramedic. Access to us, had somebody been really seriously hurt, was, I don't think there would have been the access. And there was one point, I want to say this was maybe day 3, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, where we had done what we thought was the highest climb of the day. We sort of then trekked down a bit, and then it was like, okay, we have to get advanced through this particularly rigorous, more a straight climb than it was a hike. I mean, everybody shortened their walking sticks, and we were literally pulling ourselves up. And I remember doing reasonably well, but I remember thinking, if this goes bad, I mean, whether it's a broken ankle or, a cardiac moment or anything, I thought that was crazy. And then because I had food poisoning early on, I called my doctor to just get, to check in. And he had said, can you call me when you finish whatever the day was? And I told him the conditions, and he was like, we're here now, Dan, so you're in the comfort of your beautiful home. But he was like, you realize that you guys, if anything had happened, you guys would have been screwed. Like there was no, and I don't think we realized it until at the end when we went to go back to Guatemala City, how difficult it was for us in an actual vehicle going on actual roads to just get from where we were to the airport. Was supposed to be, I can't remember, but it was supposed to be like maybe an hour and a half, 2 hour thing, which was hours and hours of, unexpected issues. So I think that was one way that for starters, we definitely cheated death. I just don't think we knew it. And I think had we been aware of it, I think we were aware of it, but I don't know. What do you guys think of that? Other than the fact that I knew Will had a pharmacy that probably could have revived anybody from with us because he's such an experienced traveler. But do you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, there was a moment. There was a moment where I heard that Steve had slipped and had injured himself, and I was thinking to myself, boy, if he broke an ankle or got injured worse than that, there was absolutely no way that there was going to be anybody to help us at that point. We had 2 guides with us, but we were already 2 hours, 3 hours into a trek, and thousands of vertical feet. I didn't, I was very concerned, and thank God he was fine. But it definitely entered my mind in terms of, wow, if one of us gets hurt up here, we're in big trouble.
Yeah.
But
what are the age ranges? Youngest guy and oldest guy on the trip?
52 to 68.
51, I think, was the youngest guy.
Yeah.
Is that Amir? I think Amir was
I think he's
50.
Oh,
Amir's
Amir's
52, actually.
And
But
then
yeah, 51,
Damien's-
52.
Yeah.
And then Boria is 68. Damien is 54.
yeah,
I thought he was 2. Okay.
We're about the same age. Yeah.
Yeah.
The two military guys are the young guys.
And then what are the age ranges on everybody's children? Did everybody have children on the trip? Was everybody married or?
Pretty much, yeah.
Everybody had a significant other or was married, has had. Everybody, I think everybody had kids. Yeah.
My youngest is 9.
Yeah.
And anybody retired, or is everybody still working? Quote unquote, however you want to.
I'm semi-retired. Yeah. I've been
semi-retired, working on something else now.
When you came home from this, and Paul, you mentioned the conversation that you had with your kids, like what was kind of the post, I don't know, maybe postmortem isn't the right word, but when you guys got home, I'm curious, like, did you talk to your kids about this? You know, did you have the separate sit down with your wives and have the drink over this? And like, how do you say, okay, how we went in versus how we came out? You know, what did I learn? Obviously your own takeaways, but what did we learn for this? And what do I want to kind of explain, or what do I want my kids to know? You know, even at various ages and stages. You know, nobody taught me this. Like we were saying, like I came up with the requisite Miami trips. You know, we were just like, when I grew up, we just went on the standard, you know, sit there, get sun. You know, there was very little risk growing up for me on the North Shore of Long Island and doing whatever we were accustomed to. All of these things are much like from 47 on. Like this whole new world has opened up. And Paul, you mentioned you have 2 boys. I've got 2 boys. Billy knows this too. Mine are 20 and 17. And trying to kind of maybe shift the mindset from how I was raised and grew up and what I knew and didn't know to what I see now and experiencing. And how do you instill that? You know, how do you maybe almost counter program or kind of change the way you see things? I'm curious about the conversations that you had with your partners, spouses, children about the things, and maybe not just this trip, but just in general about the things that you guys have done, kind of taking risk, calculated risk, but these experiences versus just the things, you know, that we can just acquire.
Well, I think from my standpoint, when I got home, I wanted to share it with everybody, but particularly my family. And so we had aggregated all the photos that we had. And so I was able to project them up on our television, and I sat everybody down and we had a dinner around me telling about the adventure that I had just gone on. And, you know, hopefully I've inspired them to kind of think that, you know, life doesn't begin until you have some of these experiences where you get out there and experience part of another culture, another world. You know, hopefully my boys have taken that to heart.
I think one of the things for me is you know, there's a book I read a lot of years back called Wild at Heart. And I think that specifically as it relates to men, you know, we're just, you know, behind the desk, you know, we just become drones. And so you really don't have this wild spirit. You know, we're supposed to be out doing things, and not to make this all about, you know, gender or whatever, but, you know, it's more of just getting out of your comfort zone and experiencing that wild at heart moment, getting out and doing something different. And, you know, and I got to give Dan a lot of credit. Dan's, you know, I call him the mix master because he's always stirring stuff up. You know, he's always, you know, trying to he didn't like complacency. And so when this opportunity came up, it was a great opportunity to meet a lot of Dan's friends that I've heard about for 20 years, but had never met. And so one of the things I was looking forward to in this was the diversification of thought and challenging discussions and learning from these guys. And so I brought actually a lot of, I mean, if it's something, Billy, as simple as that erg, that rowing machine, you know, I've thought a lot about that. And Cliff, you know, how did you train for this? Well, stair stepper, you know, it's just basic things that, you know, just jewels of wisdom that I gained. But more than anything, it's just about, you know, having a creative license and being able to go out and experience that wild at heart moment, whatever that looks at. So that was my encouragement to my family is just go do it. Time is short, and go do it. Prepare yourself, train, and do whatever. But what are you going to get out of life experiences? What do you want to get out of it? And, no experience wasted is what my wife says. And also engagement with people. What could I learn from Dan's friends that I've heard about for 20 years? So that was a big takeaway for me, I think.
Yeah, Greg, I've been very fortunate in that I've had a lot of these kind of experiences from a pretty young age. In college, I took a semester in India and worked there. That was a pretty incredible. At that time, it was what it was 40 years ago now, or more. It was really very different than the India of today, and it was mind-boggling. I then after college, I went and spent 2 years. I worked for the UNHCR / International Rescue Committee, ran a refugee camp, the educational part of a refugee camp in Thailand for Cambodian refugees, and then spent another year traveling all around Asia. So I've had that experience. One of the things I've tried to give my boys and my friends, but my two boys, I also have two boys, is that experience of taking risks, at least on the travel side. I've taken, we've gone to Vietnam and Cambodia together. We went on a ship in Indonesia, scuba diving together. This is all as a family. We went to Patagonia together. We've tried to, I've tried to, get us to go to places that are really kind of on the edge. And so I think my kids, when I came back, I was, oh, Dad went on another crazy trip again. That's great. So that, that's been a fortunate thing for me, but it was, so for me, going to Guatemala in and of itself was something that was very exciting, and I was excited to share it with my friends. But it was not a frightening experience for me, or at least not until we got there.
Some of this, what you bring up, which I think is important, is that I don't think it takes money to set the architecture for an experience like this, wherever somebody is. To drive somewhere where there's a hiking trail and to say, hey, I'm going to grab a couple of friends and we're going to, you don't even need to camp out. We'll leave early in the morning. We'll watch the sunrise and then we'll hike, and then we can sit around and leave our, smartphones at home. I think this is an extreme, a very extreme level, but I think our I don't know if it's our desire or our inability to unplug and to immerse ourselves in the human experience is one of the ironies, the ironic challenges of the digital age, where we're so hyper-connected, yet we feel more isolated. And I think this was a really interesting, for me, one of the main takeaways for me was just how refreshing it was to connect with all these guys that I wouldn't have otherwise known. And nature is like the ultimate prompt, which Dan, this, Cliff and Paul, you guys know about this, but where I grew up, this wasn't a part of my experience. And I don't want to forget that the second time we cheated death was when I got somebody who knew that I was away, sent me this absolutely daunting photo of the Agua mountain where we had camped and hiked had just burst into flames only, I think less than 2 weeks after we left. And this is where we were sleeping. And that was very, look, it's one thing when you do it and you're exhausted and you think we did this and that we all, that bond. But then the added layer of humility for me really scared me, to be honest, because, that could have happened while we were there sleeping. And I think that's the second time we cheated death. So for that, I high-fived the guys. That to me was really sobering. And as, was said earlier, there's now there's like a WhatsApp thread with all the guys, and we, when that came through, I was that was for me at least very heavy.
I think there's to what you're alluding to there and saying that you guys experienced, I think is also important to point out to guys that are listening too, is that, look, there's also a lot of white space between hunting discomfort, challenging yourself, putting yourself at serious risk, and also taking on new experiences that get you outside of your comfort zone, but also mitigate risk. Dan, you had mentioned even Everest, for example. I mean, and what you guys did was effectively hike the equivalent of Everest over the course of however many days, and you put yourselves in an environment that was, that certainly had a danger factor there. What I also want to put out to guys and being cognizant with, and you guys take calculated risk too, is like, I've done an Everest event for the last couple of years where you climb the equivalent of Everest, but it actually is glamping. It is on a closed rented mountain. There are rest stops every however many miles along the way. And, it's really for the guys who, look, I'm not going over to Everest. When you stack up the risk and reward on both sides of the column and going, okay, 51, kids, career, all this going on. Am I going off to Everest to put my life on the line? Or can I, quote unquote, check the box and have climbed the equivalent of it, meet some incredible people on the mountain, and come home and know that I've done this as safely as I possibly can and still kind of gotten my challenge off. So I think for guys that are out there listening, there's a lot of white space between how far you want to push yourself. But I think the point being that, one, challenge yourself. It is possible to do it. The people that you meet are extraordinary along the way. And I wanted to ask you guys to the second part of that point on there. My friends are very different. Like my lifelong closest friends are very different we do just different things. And I have lifelong friends that, quite frankly, they do not know me as well as guys that I've done some of these experiences. There is something about being there and going through these things with other guys where I think you open up, you're more vulnerable. Again, nobody has any preconceived notions about where you come from or what you've done or, the Grammy nomination or the financial success or anything. And I think it's really so important to have these you don't have to give up your friends or the people that you grew up with. We all have respect for each other and we like each other, but it's okay to have different interests and to have these other groups of men in your life that you can go to that WhatsApp anytime and the guys are going to respond back. Maybe not immediately in there, or you have these guys that you've gone through this with. Do you guys have that too? Kind of those almost separate groups, the guys I work with or the guys I came up with. And then these are my adventure buddies or my other type of band of brothers.
When I, almost 10 years ago, when I had a group of 21 guys come for my 55th birthday to travel down the Middle Fork River, I brought, groups from different walks of life, a couple of buddies from high school, some friends from college, and a group of guys from that I met in Greenwich, Connecticut. And along the way, it was pretty challenging. We were doing some serious whitewater rafting, and we had a few of the rafts capsize, and guys fell into 39-degree water with rapids around you, and it's pretty frightening. And one of the guys we actually pulled out of the water, and he was like shaking. And we get back to the camp and we get back home, and he said to me, "Cliff, this was one of the greatest experiences of my life that I will never ever do again." And his point was that it was a great experience, but it's not for him. And I definitely have buddies that want to do adventurous things like Dan. And along the way, you really get a chance to really spend quality time with people when you're on these types of adventures, especially, someone like Billy, who I spend a lot of the time walking with. We spend hours talking about our kids, our family, or just our life. and you really get to know people, and really, really deep. It's very different than sitting over a 2-hour dinner with somebody, at a restaurant, a loud restaurant, where you really don't get that deep conversation. So, for me, that was really, the special aspect of this trip.
Yeah, I think there's something about a very strenuous physical activity that is pretty raw. You can't hide behind your, what you've done in your career, or personality or everything. You're kind of stripped down to the bones when you're climbing up a mountain like that, and breathing heavy, and relying on the guy next to you or the guy behind you to kind of push you forward. And I've seen that in some other types of things, and I enjoy that aspect. But it was fun, because all of a sudden it's like we're all in the suit together, and there is no going anywhere else except up. So,
by the way, don't underestimate the value of humor, because there was an enormous amount of laughing going on. And I'm like thinking about like some of the one-liners from, Damien or Mike or other guys that aren't on the Zoom, where just like in the heat of real, like extreme levels of pain, out would come something so hilarious that it sort of took everybody through it. And look, Greg, I think that the part of the reason that I reached out to you about this in particular was because I think that every person that was on the trip who is in midlife had to suspend their own attachments because of the environment. So whether the attachments were, whatever your job title was, I couldn't even tell you whatever job titles are of any of these guys, to be honest. I know everybody's successful because they were able to carve out time to be able to do this, but I really couldn't tell you one from the other in that way. But I do think that suspending your role in life, whatever that is, to then give yourself over to an experience is increasingly difficult in a hyper-connected world. And I think I'm really indebted to Dan for including me, because I'm the new guy amongst this crew, but also for when things went actually not as planned, which happened very early on, and there was no return, that every one of these guys they showed up. They showed up, whatever makes them successful and whatever they do, they applied it to this, which is they just showed up for it, and they didn't, there wasn't, as Dan pointed out, like whining and moaning and, how come my room service turned down service wasn't done on time. And I moved to the floor in the tent because whatever that air mattress thing was so uncomfortable. But the musician in me, who's slept on a lot of floors in my life, I felt I was more comfortable down there anyway. So,
guys, there's so much wisdom on this call and so many great takeaways on it. There are two more questions, if you would. I'd love to get everybody's take on both of these. One is, what would you tell that guy who's on the fence, who maybe again hasn't done something like this? What would you tell that guy? I just want to ask each one of you that first.
Yeah, get off the fence and go. It's not easy.
I would say do it, but spend a lot of time on the Stairmaster.
Good point.
Dan, what about you? Because you've been kind of the glue, the guy who spearheads this and I don't want to say, pulls people along, but you're not pushing them. Like, it's kind of this, I think there's a difference between pushing people to do things that they don't want to do and pulling people along into something that maybe they didn't think they could do. And now you get that gratification of seeing them actually do it.
I guess I would say, I happen to be constitutionally a risk taker. I've done it, most of my life. I've had some times where it has not worked out very well, but on a net basis, it's worked out very well. And I think it's the old cliche about when you're on your deathbed, the thing you really focus on is what should I have done? What should I have done that I didn't do, that I didn't take the risk to do? And I think in the end, you've got to take the risk. I mean, risks are risks by definition. Sometimes they don't work out. But I think in the end, the actual taking of the risk at some level, regardless of how it turns out, is affirmational. And I think it is something that anybody should do. And to the extent people feel, hey, something like this is too big a risk, I would just urge you to really, really think about, how are you going to feel by not taking a risk in the end? And so I would really encourage people to take the risk and do the Stairmaster.
Absolutely. Billy, one of the things that has really made a deep impact on me from when we first talked was, your mantra of chasing the hit life, not just the hit song, and then kind of holistic view of what success looks like, overall in life, and not fixating too much, if I get this right, on that, that one milestone moment or the thing that might not live up, but really looking at what creating a hit life, or even like Jesse Itzler says, build that life resume, of all this. And this is to all of you guys. And maybe we can go in order as we bring this through. Like, what does maximizing midlife look like to each of you? That's something I get asked all the time by guys. It's like, hey, what does it even look like? Or how did you kind of quote unquote make it happen? And I don't profess to have all the answers. I think it's a constant work in progress in there, but if we could ask, like, what does maximizing middle age look like to each of you? Maybe Paul, we'll start with you. I'll just go in order of who's on the screen.
Yeah, I and I've given this some thought. It's a balance, So I look at the relationships I have with my family and friends, and how close are those? Those are all something that I work for, and it takes a lot of work to keep up with those. My physical conditioning. I try and stay as active as I possibly can. That's and I've encouraged my whole family to do that. And so now we have days where the whole family gets in the car and goes to the gym. And when we get to the gym, we all go our separate ways. One of us will go to the treadmill, one will go to the weights, one will go to a class, but we're all there together. And that's been a lot of fun, that we're all active and physically fit for our particular ages. And so, I think that balance between, my relationships with friends and family and my physical conditioning, I haven't spent too much on my spirituality, which is probably something that I could work on, but that gives me something to shoot for.
Billy, you're next up in order on my screen, and then we'll go to Cliff and then to Dan.
What I think you're going to find a lot of these common themes. I think I would say the biggest takeaway for me in terms of what I look for in terms of the hit life versus the hit song is this sort of milestone of validation. And it for me, it's in the world that I'm in, a lot of it is like that song, and you hear it on the radio. And I'm sure, for people in the venture business or in private equity, it's like that unicorn investment or, these moments where you make these windfalls. I think that the common thread, Greg, is that we are the enormous reality that the commodity that matters is time, and we have no control over how much we have left. And when time makes, whatever your faith is, whenever the universe makes the decision that your time is up, that is not a negotiable thing. that is just what is. And I think I've lost people very close to me, young people. I heard this week about a really close friend of someone that I grew up with, who trained her since she was in high school, who's in absolute spectacular health, and just like one day just died. And we cannot, even all of the things we can do, we should do everything to be as healthy as possible and as strong as possible. But the one variable that's just a delta that's out of our hands is time. And so I think, I would really boldface Dan's point, which is whenever our time comes, we're not going to be like, put my expensive shoes on me. No one's going to be talking about that. It's going to be the experiences you have, the people in your life that you love, you share them with. And as much as people can double down and triple down on building a portfolio of what they do with their time, that's not attached to a metric that's set by anybody else or any other industry. I think that's what I hope people take away from at least hearing this story. But certainly for me, we nibbled the edges of our mortality on this trip. And Paul said, I have a lot of tattoos. Each one of them is from a milestone that is particularly impactful for me. And I got one from this trip because it's that investment in time, and that faith in it. It served us all really well.
Did you share that design with everybody so they could take them all to their own tattoo artists and get them done too?
Yeah, none of them are getting it. It's just,
come on, I want to see Dan's arm. I've got a couple
no tats.
Cliff, how about you?
I think it's, similar to Paul, it's really about spending that quality time with my kids. I have 4 kids and my friends. And really, truly not spending time on things that don't make sense, commitments or dinners or, things that we all know we don't really want to do and they don't really make sense to do. But we all feel committed at times to do things we don't want to do and don't make sense. But anyway, it's really, to me, it's about experience. It's about not accumulating things, but accumulating experiences with your friends, with your kids. My kids and I love hiking. We love nature. So, this whole trip and showing them the pictures was, just totally up our alley. And, that's what matters to me at this point in my life.
Dan, bring it home as the as the coordinator of this epic journey.
Well, I think listen, I'm just going to build on what everybody else said. For me, ultimately, it's about learning, growing, and relating. Just that. And I, it's funny. I talked to my son, who is a software engineer, and he was working as a software engineer at a very large, very well-known software company. And the first 2 years were great. And then I could tell he was getting bored and whatnot. He said, I kept telling him, maybe you ought to take a look at something else. And he'd say, I don't know. How do I know when it's time? I said, are you learning, growing, relating? He said, not so much anymore. I said, well, no, it's time. Now it's time. And we, our bodies change as we get older. Our ambitions change as we get older. But what I don't think should ever change is the desire to learn and grow and relate. And there's all kinds of things to learn in this world. There's all kinds of ways to grow. And there's certainly all kinds of people to relate to. And we should always be focused on that. I think when we're young and when we're older, just slightly changes the direction, but it's still the same focus.
Guys, I can't thank you enough for all your time, for sharing your stories, for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your experience here. One, I'm truly inspired by it. This is exactly what I think is so important for men to hear. As you were saying, at any age or any stage of life, or anybody out there listening, about what is possible, what is probable, if you put your minds to it and then you put your bodies behind it, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, all of these these amazing things and the characteristics and character traits of each and every one of you. So thank you for coming on today and sharing it. I was inspired, Billy, as soon as I read it. Thank you for being generous enough to bring all your friends and your band of brothers on. We let the other guys who weren't here off the hook. They didn't get hammered too hard on anything. And I would love to keep tabs also on, look, what is next? There too, in this sharing and exchanging of ideas and experiences, because what you guys are doing, living and leading by example, I think is so great for the rest of us out there. So thank you for leading the charge. Thank you guys again for sharing. And if there's anything I can do to help support in any way, I'm always happy to do it. And you're welcome on anything that I do. And it may not be exactly this, but it's really great to see what you guys are doing. And I see you walking with the vest and everything too, Billy. That hasn't stopped. And at 51, I certainly also look ahead to 55, 60, 66, and so on. So now I have some birthday party planning to get on for the rest of my years as well.
So thank you guys so much. Of, Greg. It should not be something to be afraid. I got to tell you, Dan was in phenomenal shape on this trip. I was inspired, and he's got a few years on me, but I'm not afraid now to look at where he is and keep going.
Hey, 66 is the new 40.
Look, people ask me all the time, they go, what is midlife or what is middle age? And I go, look, I know some really, really old 30-year-olds and I know some really, really young 60-somethings, that are out there. So I do think it is a state of mind. I do think it's a mindset. I think it's, I keep these cards on my desk. The others say, you don't stop playing because you grow old because you stop playing. So thank you guys for leading the charge. And it was great to see you and great to meet you all in person. Take care. Thanks again, Billy.
Take care, Cliff.
Thanks so much for listening. If you can leave us a review on Spotify or Apple, that would mean so much to us and really help us out. Also, be sure to subscribe and check us out on YouTube at Midlife Male. We'll see you next time.